59% of Americans cannot cover a $1,000 emergency expense from their savings, and that number comes directly from Bankrate's January 2025 Emergency Savings Report. The Federal Reserve's own annual survey puts the picture in even sharper focus, showing that 37% of adults can't handle a $400 surprise using cash. If you're watching this without an emergency fund, or you have one that feels embarrassingly small, here's what I need you to understand. You are in the majority. Nobody failed at money here, because this economy has made saving genuinely difficult for most people. What the research actually shows is encouraging, though. Even a few $100s in savings can dramatically shift your financial life, and this video walks through exactly how to build that safety net step by step, even when your budget feels impossibly tight. We're covering how much you actually need to get started, where to keep it so it grows, practical strategies that work when money is short, the mistakes that trip most people up, and what to do after you've had to use it. The first question everyone lands on is, how much should I have in my emergency fund? And this is exactly where most financial advice loses people. The standard answer is 3 to 6 months of living expenses, which, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, feels about as useful as someone telling you to go ahead and buy a house. Let's turn that into something real. Almost every major financial expert and institution recommends that 3 to 6 month range as the long-term target. Dave Ramsey lands there, NerdWallet lands there, Vanguard and Fidelity land there, and Susie Orman actually pushes for 8 to 12 months. There's logic behind the number too. Bureau of Labor Statistics' data from early 2026 shows the average duration of unemployment sitting at about 25.7 weeks, which works out to roughly 6.5 months, while the median comes in lower at around 11 weeks. The 3 to 6 month target exists to carry you through a job loss. But here's the thing, your first milestone matters far more than that long-term target, and the research backing this up is genuinely encouraging. Two economists named Emily Gallagher and Jorge Sabat studied over 70,000 low-income households and identified a critical savings threshold of $2,467. Below that amount, every additional dollar saved significantly reduced the probability of experiencing financial hardship over the following 6 months. Gallagher put it this way to MarketWatch: once you have at least $2,467 stored away for a rainy day, your probability of experiencing hardship in the next 6 months is low. You don't even need to reach that number before the benefits kick in. Families with as little as $250 to $749 in savings were less likely to face eviction or miss utility payments after an income disruption, according to the Urban Institute. And the finding that stuck with me most was this: low-income families with $2,000 to $5,000 in savings showed more financial resilience than middle-income families with nothing saved. A lower income paired with a small cushion beat a higher income with an empty safety net. NerdWallet recommends $500 as a first goal, and Dave Ramsey's Baby Step 1 sits at $1,000. Both work as targets because your emergency fund starts protecting you well before it reaches 3 to 6 months of expenses. $500 already shifts the equation. Vanguard put numbers on the emotional side of this when they surveyed over 12,000 investors and found that holding at least $2,000 in emergency savings produced a 21% increase in financial well-being. People with no emergency savings spent 7.3 hours per week worrying about money, while those with $2,000 or more spent 3.7 hours, which is nearly cutting that financial stress in half. Start at $500, move to $1,000, build toward that $2,467 threshold, and then work your way to 3 to 6 months, one step at a time. Now that you know your target, the question becomes where this money should actually sit, and the answer is straightforward: a high-yield savings account at a separate bank from your everyday checking. 2 reasons drive this. Separation creates friction, which protects you. When your emergency fund shares space with the account you use for groceries, that money gets spent. And that's not a willpower problem, it's a visibility problem. David Bach frames it well when he says, "The key to an emergency account is not having an ATM card linked to it and not having a checking account attached to it. Making deposits easy and withdrawals slightly inconvenient is the whole point." The second reason is that a high-yield savings account actually pays you to save. Right now, the FDIC lists the national average savings account rate at 0.39% APY, which amounts to almost nothing. Top online high-yield savings accounts pay 8 to 10 times that. As of April 2026, CIT Bank offers 3.75%, Marcus by Goldman Sachs sits at 3.65%, Discover comes in at 3.3%, and Ally, Capital One, and American Express each land around 3.2%. These rates do move with the Federal Reserve's interest rate decisions, but the gap between a regular savings account and a high-yield one stays consistently wide. On $1,000, 0.39% earns you about $3.90 a year, while 3.5% earns you $35. That's not life-changing money, but it's free money for choosing the right account. FDIC insurance covers every one of these accounts up to $250,000 per depositor per bank. Since the FDIC began operating in 1933, no depositor has ever lost a penny of insured funds. Most of these accounts also charge no monthly fees and require no minimum balance to open. One question that comes up often is whether you should invest your emergency fund instead, and the answer is no. Your emergency fund needs to stay boring and accessible. The S&P 500 lost 57% from 2007 to 2009 and dropped 34% in 33 days at the start of COVID. What makes this especially painful is that emergencies and market crashes tend to arrive at the same time, because job losses spike during recessions, which is exactly when a stock-based emergency fund would sit at its lowest value. A high-yield savings account gives you same-day access with zero risk of loss and no tax complications, which is exactly what emergency money needs to be. This section is the one that actually matters, because understanding why you need an emergency fund and where to put it doesn't help if you genuinely feel like nothing is left over at the end of the month. These are strategies that work on a tight budget. The first approach is the $20 a week method. $20 multiplied by 52 weeks produces $1,040 in a year, which crosses Dave Ramsey's Baby Step 1 threshold in 12 months. If $20 feels like too much right now, $10 a week lands at $520 in a year, and that crosses the $500 starter goal NerdWallet recommends. Consistency matters more than the amount. The second approach is automation, and this is the single most important strategy in the entire video. Setting up an automatic transfer from checking to your high-yield savings account on the same day your paycheck lands means you never see the money, never miss it, and never face a decision about whether to save it. Automation is the pay-yourself-first principle, which traces all the way back to 1926, when George S. Clason wrote The Richest Man in Babylon. His first rule, paraphrased from the original language, was that for every 10 coins you earn, you keep one for yourself before spending anything else, saving at least 10% before paying a single bill. 10% might not feel realistic for everyone right now, and that's completely fine. Even 2 or 3% set to transfer automatically builds your fund over time. Roundup savings programs offer a third approach. Several banks and apps automatically round purchases to the nearest dollar and move the spare change into savings. Bank of America launched Keep the Change back in 2005, and the program has helped over 12 million customers collectively save $2 billion. Chime rounds up debit card purchases and can also automatically divert 10% of each direct deposit into savings, while Acorns rounds up purchases and invests the spare change into diversified portfolios. Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta data shows the average person making about 46 payment transactions a month. At roughly 50 cents per roundup, that adds up to about $23 a month, or $276 a year in savings you barely notice. Roundups alone won't build your entire fund, but they supplement your main strategy nicely. The fourth approach, and the one most people overlook, is the tax refund. IRS data puts the average federal tax refund for the 2026 filing season at $3,521. Directing even half of that into an emergency fund blows past the $2,467 threshold that research ties to dramatically reduced financial hardship. Directing the whole refund could cover several months of basic expenses in a single move depending on your cost of living. Spending a refund is tempting because it feels like found money, but channeling it into an emergency fund ranks among the highest return financial moves available. Avoiding common mistakes carries the same weight as building the fund in the first place. So let's run through the three that show up most often. Using the fund for non-emergencies tops the list. A true emergency is unexpected, necessary, and urgent. Car breakdowns qualify, medical bills qualify, job loss qualifies. A sale at your favorite store does not qualify, and neither does a vacation. None of this is about deprivation. Clarity about what this specific money covers is the whole point. Keeping the fund in your checking account is the second mistake, and this one deserves repeating. Money sitting in the same account you use daily will get absorbed into daily spending. A separate high-yield savings account at a different bank removes that problem. The third mistake is draining the fund during an emergency and then never rebuilding it. Using your emergency fund for a real emergency is a success, because that's exactly what it exists for. What Gallagher and Sabat found encouraging in their research was that even households who spent their entire savings buffer fared better than those who never saved at all. Replenishing afterward restores the full protective effect. So restarting those automatic transfers the moment the emergency passes should sit near the top of your priorities. Real numbers bring this into focus and show why even $1,000 in savings functions as a genuine lifeline. Car repairs hit most people first and most often. AAA estimates about 11 cents per mile in maintenance, repair, and tire costs, which works out to roughly $1,650 a year at 15,000 miles. Common surprises like alternators run $500 to $600, and transmission work climbs into the mid-four figures. Medical bills carry similar. Claims data puts the average emergency room visit at approximately $2,715. With employer insurance, the average out-of-pocket cost drops to about $646, but without insurance, that number jumps to $2,400 to $2,600. Home repairs deliver their own shocks. Water heater replacements range from $900 to $3,500. HVAC replacement runs $5,000 to $12,000 or more, and roof repair alone spans about $400 up to nearly $2,000. Job loss extends the timeline of financial pressure. Average unemployment duration currently sits at about 25.7 weeks, which is over 6 months, and even the median comes in around 11 weeks, nearly 3 months. What these numbers reveal is that most common emergencies fall in the $500 to $2,500 range, which means that first $1,000 milestone covers a huge percentage of the emergencies that actually happen to real people. $1,000 is not just a round number, it's a functional safety net. When an emergency lands and savings don't exist, the math turns brutal fast. 20.97% is the average credit card interest rate right now, according to the Federal Reserve. And for people carrying balances, the number climbs to 22.3%. The Fed calls that the highest rate in the history of its data series. Picture a $1,000 car repair charged to a credit card at 21% APR because no savings exist to cover it. Minimum payments stretch that balance across roughly 5 or more years and pile on between $580 and $650 in total interest. A $1,000 problem becomes a $1,500 to $1,650 problem, and that's actually the better scenario compared to the alternative. About 12 million Americans turn to payday loans every year, and this is where the numbers become staggering. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau reports that the typical payday loan charges $15 per hundred borrowed for a 2-week term, which works out to a 391% APR. The average payday loan sits at $375, and the typical borrower ends up spending $520 to borrow that amount because 80% of payday loans aren't repaid within 2 weeks, and nearly 70% of borrowers take a second loan within a month. Applied to a $1,000 emergency, a payday loan at $15 per hundred costs $150 in fees for just 2 weeks. Rolled over 4 times, which is common, total fees reach $600. That same $1,000 emergency sitting in a high-yield savings account costs nothing, and in fact it earned 3+% while waiting there. And this is where it gets worse, because the cascade is what truly traps people. One uncovered emergency triggers credit card debt at 21%, which triggers late fees on other bills, which triggers overdraft charges, which damages credit scores, which raises the cost of every future loan. That cycle feeds on itself, and an emergency fund is what breaks it. Total U.S. credit card debt reached $1.277 trillion in the fourth quarter of 2025, the highest figure on record. A significant portion of that debt started as emergencies people couldn't cover with cash. Nobody talks about this part, but it deserves attention. What happens after your emergency fund does its job? Recognize first that spending the fund was a win, not a failure. You avoided credit card interest at 21%. You avoided payday loan fees at 391%. That qualifies as a major financial victory. Restart your automatic transfers right away, even if the amount drops below what you were saving before. Redirect any discretionary spending toward rebuilding, and if your tax refund is on the way, earmark part or all of it for that purpose. What the Urban Institute's research showed is that even getting back to $250 to $749 meaningfully reduces hardship risk. You don't need to reach your full target in one shot because every dollar rebuilt starts protecting you immediately. 59% of Americans cannot cover a $1,000 emergency from their savings, and you now understand more about this topic than most of them ever will. You know your fund starts protecting you well before it reaches 3 to 6 months, because even $500 shifts your resilience. You know a high-yield savings account at a separate bank, earning over 3% instead of nearly nothing, is where the money belongs. You know $20 a week reaches $1,000 in a year, and that automating it on payday ranks as the single best move available. And you know the true cost of not having one, from credit card interest to payday loan traps to the cascading damage that turns one bad month into years of debt. Dave Ramsey put it simply: an emergency fund turns a crisis into an inconvenience. That single sentence captures everything this video covers. 6 months from now, something will break. The car, the furnace, something arriving at the worst possible time. And instead of panic, instead of scrambling for a credit card or calling family, you'll transfer the money from your emergency fund, handle it, and move on with your life. That calm, that quiet confidence that you can absorb what life throws at you is what financial security actually feels like. Not a mansion, not a yacht, just the knowledge that you're covered. That is what an emergency fund gives you, and it starts with your next paycheck. We have a full series on building your financial foundation, and the next step is figuring out a budget that actually works for your life. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.